There's a building on Corunna Road in Flint, Michigan, a place many pass without a second glance. The windows are boarded up. The walls are covered in fading graffiti. The parking lot, once full of school buses and parent pickups, is now cracked and crumbling, littered with garbage, discarded furniture, and silence. At first glance, it looks like just another abandoned building in a city full of them. But for those who know, this place meant something. This was the Zimmerman Center School. Zimmerman wasn't your average school. It didn't have championship banners or new technology or a marching band at Friday night games. What it did have was heart and purpose. It was a lifeline for students who had run out of options, a place for young people who didn't fit into the traditional mold. Some had behavioral issues, others struggled academically. Some were dealing with trauma most adults couldn't handle. Zimmerman was their last stop, and for some, their first real shot. This was an alternative education center. It existed for the kids who had been expelled, suspended, or written off. But inside these walls, there weren't statistics. There were people, and they were met with patience, guidance, and a stubborn kind of hope. The staff here weren't just teachers. They were mentors, counselors, role models. They showed up every day, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard, because they knew that for many of these students, Zimmerman was the only steady thing in their lives. It wasn't glamorous, the resources were thin, the building wasn't fancy, but the mission was clear. Give these kids a reason to believe in themselves again. Help them graduate, help them survive, help them heal. But as powerful as that mission was, it wasn't enough to save the school from the larger storm brewing around it. To understand why Zimmerman is now silent, we have to talk about Flint. Once, Flint was a titan of American industry. This city gave birth to General Motors, the heartbeat of the U.S. auto industry. Thousands of people came to Flint chasing opportunity, good jobs, good pay, a good life. And for a while, that promise held. Flint thrived, neighborhoods blossomed, schools were full, and families were stable. But in the 1980s, the tide began to turn. General Motors began closing its plants. Automation and outsourcing replaced workers. One by one, jobs disappeared, and with them went stability. The tax base shrank, crime rose, poverty spread, entire neighborhoods emptied out, and what remained were the people who didn't have the means to leave. The decline hit everything, but education was hit especially hard. Schools were consolidated, underfunded, neglected. Buildings fell into disrepair, teachers were laid off, and programs were cut. Zimmerman held on for as long as it could. For years it operated on bare bones. The need was still there, maybe more than ever, but the support wasn't. Eventually the doors were closed, not with ceremony, not with protest, just another quiet shutdown in a city too tired to fight back. Now Zimmerman Center School stands empty, a ghost of what it once was, and the transformation is painful to witness. The playground is gone, the signage is faded and rusted. The parking lot is a dumping ground, filled with broken TVs, mattresses, empty liquor bottles, tires, fast food wrappers, and bags of garbage that no one will ever clean up. The air smells of mildew and dry rot. Windows are shattered. Doors are tagged with graffiti. The roof is caving in places. Nature is creeping in, slowly reclaiming what humans abandoned. But this isn't just about a building falling apart. It's about what it represents. Because Zimmerman was never just about walls and floors and desks. It was about people, students who needed someone to believe in them, teachers who gave more than they were ever paid for, families who, despite everything, still hoped for something better. We ask ourselves how a generation can feel invisible, how a child can grow up angry at a world that seemed to have forgotten them. This is how. It starts here, when schools close, when support disappears, and when places meant to help are left to rot. Zimmerman didn't fail because of the kids. It didn't fail because of the staff. It failed because of a system that failed Flint, and by extension, failed every child who walked through those doors looking for a way forward. And yet, in its ruin, Zimmerman still speaks. It speaks of resilience, of lives impacted, of quiet victories no one celebrated. For some students, Zimmerman was the only place that ever felt safe, the only place that saw them as more than their mistakes. And for the educators who worked there, it was a calling. They gave everything they had in a system that gave them almost nothing in return. Maybe even now, Zimmerman can still mean something, not as a working school, but as a reminder that buildings, even in decay, are monuments to our choices, our values, our failures. Because when we let places like Zimmerman fall, we're not just losing architecture, we're losing connection, memory, identity. We're sending a message that these stories don't matter, that these lives don't matter. This building was a lifeline once, and in some ways, it still is. A lifeline to truth, a window into what happens when we abandon the places and people that need us most. This is Zimmerman Center School. This is Flint, Michigan. And this is a story that demands to be remembered.